I really appreciate the opportunity to spend a few moments talking about how we can use the tenets and practices of the cultural humility perspective to adopt a global mindset. So that if we're lucky enough to be invited into some global space, that our actions can match our intentions. Say we were going to do a short-term study abroad with service learning embedded in southern India, we would be successful. Successful not so much for ourselves, but for the communities and people that we were partnering with. What I found is that if I were to get a group of students interested in traveling abroad together, and I showed them this picture, and I tell them, honestly, that I took this picture one morning of an elephant going for a bath while some people were washing their clothes upstream in southern India, the part of their brain that's in charge of sign me up functions gets lit up and my class fills up and we're all set, ready to go. But not exactly. There's some work we have to do. The setup for this talk is that for people, especially people who are coming from the global north and want to do some service in the global south, there are some things we need to consider, some traps. First is I want to say that I use the terms global north and global south purposely because language is important. If I were to say developed world and developing or undeveloped world or first world and third world, I've already instituted the idea of power and difference in the conversation, and that is inviting the traps that I want to talk about. We could name those traps. We could call them saviorism, colonialism, and supremacy. And the traps are real, and regular people just like me, can be vulnerable to them. So the point of this talk is that we have to have an active strategy to mitigate as much as possible the effect of these traps. So how this started out was I began by leading service learning embedded study abroad trips, first to Veliki Novgorod, Russia, then more recently in Kingston, Jamaica, and most frequently to southern India, to Kerala, India. And as much as there was a lot of things to celebrate about these trips, honesty compels me to say that increasingly I became aware that there were things that weren't going exactly right. And those things relate to the traps that I want to talk about. So I've borrowed this little guy from Harry Potter world, some of you may recognize it. It's the three-headed monster, and the monster spins a good tale. Saviorism monster tells us that good people help other people. It's very, very enticing. Colonialism monster tells us that we, capital W, capital E, we civilize the uncivilized world. And supremacy monster tells us that with our bankroll, we can solve any of the world's problems. Now, I didn't make the monsters up, but I was guilty of letting them run amok in my classes. And I had to do something to try to mitigate that effect so that we could have the kind of experience that I was dreaming up. And that's how I came to the cultural humility perspective. And I'm hoping that if we can understand it, then it can be useful for all of us. Just so that we're all on the same page, cultural humility as a concept sprang forth in the late 1990s. We have general consensus that it was the brainchild of these two nurse practitioners working in the San Francisco Bay Area, Tara Vallon and Murray Garcia, who were dissatisfied with the dominant model, which was cultural competency, because cultural competency places all the effect in the person, not in the service recipient. And they felt that a lot of times that's where things start going astray. So cultural humility asks us to be extremely conscious of how we are locating ourselves in society and to actively prioritize the other. A central idea, tenet of cultural humility is that you have to be active to keep the traps at bay. So you have to actively think about some of the words that we use and the ideas that we bring. So, for instance, what is normal? What is healthy behavior? What is health-seeking behavior? All these kind of ideas run through our head. If they go unchecked, then we may be guilty of passing judgment on others because their behavior is different from our behavior. And so this is the beauty of the cultural humility perspective, that it allows us, if we're active about it, to bring in a process so that we are directly prioritizing somebody else, to understand that no amount of knowledge, expertise on bankroll on my part can supersede the authority of another. And so that it really asks us to reach in to the other, to pull forward their lived experience, their expertise. So how this works in my classes is that at the end of each day, the entire group gathers. All the students, all the instructors in the course gather, and we spend time processing that day. What were the points of challenge? What were the points where we use a cultural humility perspective to bring in, to mitigate the challenge? What were the various traps that came up in our work that day? And out of that whole process, we come up with some prompts. And so at the end of that circle discussion, we all turn to journaling. Everybody is given a journal at the start of the trip. All the students, all the instructors, and we journal every day. The journal, sure, you can write, I had the best masala dosa for lunch today in this restaurant that I've ever had. Yeah, there's no problem with that. I love a good masala dosa myself. But that's not the point of the journal. The point of the journal is to use the prompts that we collectively develop so that you are writing about the ways in which you use a cultural humility perspective to keep the traps at bay so that our action matches our intention. We place a lot of energy on systems thinking, and we believe that the only way to be anti-oppressive is to acknowledge the role that oppression plays in any exchange. I suppose that was a political statement on my part. Maybe the entire talk has been political. Maybe it's causing you pain. I guess if it's causing you pain, I would just respectfully say I think you're missing the point of my talk, and that maybe, just maybe, the pain you're experiencing isn't coming from my words, but because a large three-headed animal has clomped itself onto your hindquarters. We come at this with the idea that nothing about us without us, that we have to engage in partnerships, and we have to own and take responsibility for the kind of partnerships that we create so that we can dig into the real riches. And what I've found is that as much as I love elephants, and seeing elephants out there like that is really cool, and as much as I love a good masala dosa in southern India, the real riches aren't those kind of things. The real riches are in the relationships that we can build if we're really coming at people, pulling forth their lived expertise and knowledge. And that I want to say that selfless service is possible, but selfless service is only possible if we're not out there busy propping ourselves up. And that's because being a learner is way cooler than being an expert. And I'm really grateful and honored by the friendships and partnerships that have helped me develop this particular conversation. To my partners in Kingston, Jamaica, who've gone out of their way to help me understand what their real needs are, not what I would think that they are. And to my friends and partners in Kerala, India, who've taught me the real meaning of those two words, friendship and partnership. See, because when you work this way, there is a non-summativity in the work, so that 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. 1 plus 1 can equal 3 or 10 or more. Because we're actually in community with each other, learning from each other, putting judgment aside, keeping the traps aside, and moving forward. I'm really honored to be able to spend some time talking with you. I appreciate your kind attention. Some of us like to read. Those ideas that I've been talking about all didn't come from me, so there's some really great places to get some more knowledge, and I thank you so much.